right. I will call the advisory committee meeting to order at 7:30 p.m. All advisory is here with the exception of Adam Notiff. Well, we start by welcoming Howard. Howard, welcome to the committee. And I don't know if you want to just do a quick introduction for yourself. I'm not sure if everybody knows you, but great to hear from you.
Thank you for having me. Hi, Howard Rose. Been in town 8 years now, and was asked to join, and I'm honored to do so. So,
awesome. Well, welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Why don't we bring over Tim Davis first, Eric, and then we'll get that out of the way, and then we'll do the other stuff.
He is on his way over.
All right.
Good evening, all. Thank you very much.
Hey, Tim. How's it going?
Going. First
All
week
right,
of
so I'll
summer.
do-
First week of summer.
Oh, I just saw your note, Tim, so we bumped you up. So you're good. So I think everybody saw the memo that got sent out in terms of what Tim was looking for and kind of the reasoning behind what happened. Long story short, with this last payroll, he will be over his $400,000 annual limit that we set at town meeting. Select board last night voted unanimously to approve increasing it to $410,000, but they also need a vote from advisory to do the same. So do we have entertain a motion to do increase the Recreation Commission's annual spending limit? Is that the right term? To $410,000?
So moved, Andrew.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Any discussion? All right. Roll call vote. Tim?
Aye.
Howard?
Hi.
Eric?
Aye.
Marcy?
Aye.
And Andrew is aye. All right. There you go, Tim. Quick
All
and
right.
easy to get you out of here.
Thank you so much.
Enjoy Neary.
Yeah.
All right. Let's get back to the agenda. Minutes. Did anyone have any edits for the 6-8 minutes?
Is there a typo on line 21? Is the word coin supposed to be there?
That's a good question. Let's see. I don't think so. Thank you, Tim.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Which he may be able to cover in his budget.
That sounds right.
Yeah, that's all right. Sounds about right.
All right, gotcha.
You just shortened it to coin. You just took out the ver. Just made it easier.
Thanks.
Is that all you got, Tim?
Yes.
Anybody else have any edits? I didn't have any, so. Is there a motion to approve the minutes as amended for 6/8/22?
I make a motion to approve the minutes as amended for 6/22.
Second.
All right, roll call vote. Tim?
Aye.
Eric?
Aye.
Marcy?
Aye.
Howard?
I'm going to abstain since I wasn't there. So,
No worries. And Andrew is aye. The 4-0-1. Claire.
Thank you.
Thank you, Claire.
All right, chair report. No real update on the rebuilding committee. We haven't met yet since our last meeting. Possible reserve funds, basically it's the same as we had before. I think Jim's overage for the elections is going to be a little bit lower than what we had in the line. I think it was about $1,000 lower, so not the end of the world. We will vote on that in the next meeting. But again, I think we are well below our $190,000 level. I still haven't gotten the number for whatever they're looking for chief policy yet, but we'll have that for that meeting. Committee liaison reports. So I watched a couple meetings. I provide some updates. I'm not sure if anybody else was able to kind of keep track of anything. So in terms of yesterday's or 2 days ago, capital planning met. Mostly they met with Kevin Miller from Historical, who was talking about his historic National Historic District sign project, which capital planning, which also went through ARPA, which the select board was in favor of, but they asked him to go before capital because it wasn't on the capital plan yet, mostly because of the timing. We became the National Historic District about the exact same time. They emailed everybody saying, hey, do you have any ARPA projects? So that's why it went through that avenue. Capital was in favor. They did actually push to say there was a seventh sign that Kevin had taken off because of the budget was increased, and Capital recommended doing it at that time. So they might actually even go back to ask for a little increased budget there, but everybody seemed in favor of the project. So that was good. And what that would be for people is there would be 7 different street signs, basically, as people would enter the historic district from Main Street, from Porterville Road, from Lattisquama, School Street, et cetera. That would basically tell you when you entered the historic district, those big, nice brass signs that you see in other towns.
Andrew?
Yep.
Question.
Sure.
2 things, which I'm not sure if you know the answer to this, but one, do you know what the remaining balances of ARPA funds that haven't been allocated is?
It's pretty significant because they haven't really fully allocated. They just kind of done the support. And Tim, keep me honest there. They just kind of are supporting what you guys had suggested, but there was still, if they did everything, which they haven't approved them all, and transfer the funds, but if they did, they would still have what, 500,000 left over? Does that seem right?
There wasn't a lot. We recommended most of the money out.
Yeah.
Unless you know what, we might have, there might be that that 500,000 for next year's tax.
Yeah, that was what I was thinking of.
Yeah, you're right. Sorry.
I don't want to interrupt, but Adam's got his hand up.
Bring him over. Thank you, Marcy.
I don't know, Andrew, has the select board voted on all those items yet?
I think they kind of voted to support them. And, some of them they wanted capital to review. But I don't think they, officially voted to basically transfer the funds and allow them, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think they're still kind of like, yep, these all sound pretty good. Let's do a little bit more due diligence. Some of them needed like firmed up quotes, right? So before they transfer the funds and make them available, they were just going to do a little more due diligence. And then also in CIPC, they talked about the concept of creating a community center committee, which is basically representatives from Capital, the public, Recreation, Library, Council on Aging, maybe some other ones, to talk about do we have a community center? Could it be Woodward? What do we do with Woodward? Or do we do other options? So kind of, passing that into another committee to do that kind of conversation of if we did close Woodward and use it for something, how would that look? Or if we didn't do that, how would it look for those for a community center?
Sure, don't you think?
What?
Doesn't that seem a bit premature?
I think it's more of a wish list kind of a project, just kind of putting together a plan on what these areas would want and how that might fit together. But I think it's just Capital would like some other committee to kind of take the torch and start to run and leave off where they left off.
I see.
Right. I think there's a lot of options. We looked at Woodward, but do you keep Council on Aging at Courteville Hall and do another addition or another expansion? Do you, what do you do with the library? There was, an auxiliary library, maybe a town hall, but do we wait till we can get Mass Library Association's funding for a larger library, a different library, right? So I think it's just kind of one scenario has been thought of, but does that work for everybody? Do we want, one community center or isolated, recreation center versus senior center, et cetera?
The town voted to spend $1 million on this issue, right? Why are we not waiting on the results of that before we do anything?
For Neary, you mean?
I mean, that NERI is the first pin that's going to fall, right?
Yeah.
Before any other decisions that can be made.
So they talked about the general idea there is they want it to kind of come together with the Neary process so that if the Neary committee comes together and the recommendation is to close Woodward, that those groups, are on board with that concept or using that building, right? Because MSBA is going to say, what are you going to do with it? And there needs to be community support to do that. I think they're just looking for those areas to start to take the torch and say that, yeah, we would be in support of that, or wouldn't we? We would not be in support of closing Woodward. It will not fit for our needs. And then that can help influence the decision that, the Neary committee does. So that the quote was, they hope to have the recommendation ready by the time Neary School Building makes its recommendation. He noted that if the committee recommends closing Woodward School, the state will want better answers on the town's plans and community support for what it would do with the building.
I'm sorry, did you mean NERI or Woodward?
What you would do with Woodward, yeah, if you closed it. What would the town do if it moved into town use versus schools?
I see. All right, if you closed it as a school.
Correct. But those are the two main things from CIPC. So one thing is, would we want to have an advisory member on that board, or just, basically, review it with them when they get to that point? I'm not sure we have to necessarily have somebody on that, but if anybody was that interested, we could push to have the charge include an advisory member.
I'm not.
Okay. I'm not volunteering for it, so I won't ask for it unless anybody else wants to do it. Okay.
Still getting my feet wet, so I'm not there yet.
We usually, Howard, we they ask for advisory representatives on other committees. So I'm on the Neary committee, school building committee, which anybody else, still wants to jump in, they're more than welcome. So sometimes it can be a little difficult. We can only be on one ad hoc committee. We can't be on a standing committee. So it gets a little tricky in terms of how we sit on different things. So, all right, I will let Jason know that right now we have no interest, but we could certainly help out, advise, or answer any questions they might have. All right, any other questions on the capital committee? All right, and then the only other one is select board met last night briefly. Obviously they voted to increase the rec limit unanimously. They're going to bring in an outside firm to assess police chief candidates internally. One question was how they were going to pay that. I did talk to Kathy today. My recommendation is to pay it out of the police budget because there'll be a surplus with not having the chief's salary for a period of time.
Hey, Andrew, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have what may be an incredibly stupid question.
Sure.
How many lieutenants do we have in town?
I think just one.
So we have one candidate in town. Why are we bringing in and paying for an external search firm to look for candidates when we have one lieutenant? And there's no possibility that a sergeant or lower is going to be jumped up above a lieutenant.
I think there is, I don't know how many candidates there are, but I know it's more than one. And I think the question is whether or not these candidates are strong enough or whether or not we need to look externally.
Right. Is the plan that they're going to solicit external candidates? I mean, maybe that person's not interested. I don't know. I didn't hear that, but I don't know what the rationale was either, but I think that might be part of it.
Yeah, the rationale was just basically to do the assessment on internal first. And if those candidates either don't want it or they don't feel are strong enough or, whatever, they'll look external first.
Do we need a search firm for that?
It's not a search firm. It's more of an assessment firm. So there's different, they can do like psychological things and communication style, like we did with Chief Achilles. They went to an assessment center and they ran the candidates through a certain number of tests.
I just don't understand how you hire somebody to be a police captain if they are not currently a lieutenant. I mean, it's a huge jump going from sergeant or lower all the way up to captain. And why would we volunteer our town for that kind of a jump? I don't get this. It doesn't make sense.
I think even if it's just one person, if it's just Lieutenant Newell, they still want to have a third party come in and do an assessment.
Okay, so now we're getting to the crux of it. If it's one person and you want to do an assessment, then you should open it up to external candidates as well, right? And look at the whole group equally at the same time.
We could. The select board has decided that they didn't want to open it up until external, until they assess the internal first.
Okay.
And do you know what the cost is?
It's about like 4,000 to 6,000.
Yeah. I think they were gonna put together a search committee too, Andrew, am I right? I didn't attend, I didn't listen
Yeah,
closely this week, but
It sounded like they weren't going to have a search committee until they kind of went external. I think they were going to try to tap some local knowledge, some, people, law enforcement background in terms of whether or not they've worked with any certain firms that do this work, just to get some background from people in town. But I think that, basically once they identify the group, since it's below the procurement amount, they can go direct to that group and start the work. But the idea is they were talking about doing a reserve fund transfer to pay for it. I suggested just putting it in the police budget because they're going to be under budget because they're not paying a chief's salary for a period of time. And then if for whatever reason they're over budget because of it, we can assess that later in the year. All right.
So the lieutenant is our acting chief, right?
Correct.
So I'm sorry, I'm being pedantic, but our lieutenant, who was our acting chief, is going to be evaluated for whether or not he can do the job that he's currently doing right now. And then we're going to bring in possibly other people to see if they can do the job that he's doing.
Yep.
Yeah, that's probably not all that uncommon. I think that's okay, because we need an acting chief and he's the most qualified internal to do it. It doesn't mean he's necessarily the best long-term solution, but I still don't know why we necessarily need this whole assessment to take place if they're not just going to go to also inviting in external candidates. You might as well do it all together, in my opinion, but I guess that decision's already been made.
Yep.
Is the assumption also, I don't know if this decision's already been made, that the payout for Chief Paulus would come out of the reserve fund?
I think it's going to need to be.
Wouldn't that come out of the police fund since his salary was already part of that fund?
Yeah, but I think there's some payout for future salary because of his contract. So it's obviously more than what his current total 2022 would have been.
But if we haven't paid the salary moving forward, that's still on the books. If I remember correctly, it's a 5-month payout. Assuming no one's hired in that 5 months, it should cover it.
But what I'm saying is that covers you through June 30th, right? Because that salary is only in the budget through June 30th. The additional 5 months, if they paid him right this year, then that would be next year's salary that we're moving into this year, which is why we'd have a surplus next year.
Okay.
Yeah, and is that sorry, did I cut you off, Howard?
Nope.
Is that decision already final, that it is coming out of the reserve fund, or is that something that is still up for negotiation?
No, it's the decision to pay him, I think, has been done.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if they've actually cut the check, but they probably have. The issue is it's gone, that has caused the budget to go over. So at the end of the year, their budget is over. The reserve fund is probably the most logical place to cover that unforeseen cost. Otherwise, if we don't approve it, we basically end the year over budget, and we get into all sorts of red flags with the state, et cetera, et cetera.
I mean, couldn't we appropriate from free cash?
We don't have our free cash until next fall because it's not certified yet.
Well, I mean, we have the lump sum from previous years, right?
But that's already been moved into revenue. The 1.6, whatever it is. And we probably, and I think we would have needed to. No, I think it's already been moved into the general fund. I think we would have needed to do something different. All right. Wasn't too much else in the agenda for select, just basically some consent agenda where they accepted some donations. They extended the St. Mark's Park Working Group and increased the charge to kind of include the entirety of the park area, not just the circle in the middle. And they appointed Freddie Gillespie from Open Space and Kevin Miller from Historical to the committee. Grant Farrington to Historical Commission, Andrew Dennington to Shopsy. I think he's filling in for Marty's seat. And they approved the MWRA permit for access to the trails. That's the basic gist. Marcy, I'm not sure if you saw it or if I missed anything.
I think you captured everything, Andrew. Like I said, I was listening, but I wasn't paying close attention to everything that was going on that night. So I think that that everything you said sounds right.
Okay.
Yep.
That's all I have. I don't know if anybody else saw any other meetings or has anything else that they've heard that they wanted to bring to the committee's attention.
Andrew, for these liaison reports, I wonder if we can come up with a schedule rather than it being a weekly. Maybe some of them are helpful to have weekly. That'll be, just to be honest, tough for me to commit to providing reports for 3 different committees on a weekly basis. So I don't know if others feel the same way.
Yeah,
especially over the summer. I know I've got quite a bit of travel and vacations and things like that. So I wonder if we can go to like a monthly schedule or a rotation of some sort.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it was trying to make it easy. So if you don't watch them regularly, then that's fine, right? I think it's just one of those, I happen to catch select board. So I figured if anybody hadn't seen it, I'll just give an update. So if you haven't seen the meeting, no pressure. We all have the ability to watch any meeting we want or to read minutes. So it's just one of those, since I caught those 2 meetings, I figured I would, give everybody the Cliff Notes version. And if nobody has watched a meeting, that's perfectly fine. I don't feel you don't have to do anything. It was just, if you are following a meeting or you are following a committee, then, feel free to kind of give everybody an update if they hadn't caught it. So it's for informational purposes only, no pressure. So don't feel that you have to watch them. It's just, if you happen to watch them, if you can let us know, that'd be great.
Okay.
Andrew, I feel like we haven't met since the select board meeting where the Hopkinton water project came up.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a lot around that. So maybe everyone's watched the meeting or read up on, and that's fine. But if not, certainly I think it's everybody listening to the meeting if they haven't.
Yeah, I can update that in the liaison report section as well. Is everybody familiar with that, or do they want to give me want me to give them the 10,000 foot level?
Go ahead.
Sure. So there is a proposal that DPW has been working with the town of Hopkinton to have Hopkinton basically purchase MWRA water from Southborough. So basically connect into MWRA. Right now they have a bunch of different sources, some from Ashland, wells, and different things. There's something that happened in one of their wells last week, which basically they had to not water the lawns and not use any water, so that they made sure they had enough water for the fire suppression system. So they're looking to kind of upgrade their water system by connecting into MWRA. They would purchase through us, to MWRA, a significant amount of water, about as much as we use. And one of the items in that is they would replace a bunch of pumps, they would replace a bunch of pipes, Basically the 2 new pumps that we just put in, 1 and 7 years ago, would need to be replaced. And they would replace the water tower on Oak Hill in my backyard with a taller one. So that was why I am very familiar with this project. Unfortunately, I think my house is the most impacted in town. But it would take the water tower from 85 feet to about 108 feet, maybe even a little taller. And they basically would turn the town's water system. And we have 2 pressure zones, a high pressure zone and a low pressure zone right now, and it would turn it all into one zone. So there's some benefits to that. So I think they're still weighing what this looks like and kind of understanding it from a concept, or what the pricing share or what the cost share would be for this. But
It's very clear what Hopkinton gets from this, right? It's still unclear to me what we get.
Tim, I think right now the deal on the table is very good for Hopkinton. I mean, they're paying for stuff that we didn't need paid for. A new pumping station, which we just replaced ours 2 years ago. Replaced the other one 7 years ago, but they have a 30 or 40 year shelf life. So not a real, the other pipes that they're replacing are basically 30 years out of their 100-year lifespan. The water tower doesn't need to be replaced. And right now I think that the idea is that Hopkinton would pay for everything except for half the water tower, which would be about $2.5 million from Southborough to do that. So I don't think that right now that's a good enough deal for Southborough to look at. And, I think there's negotiations to be had. Hopkinton obviously needs this. So I think there's a fine line between making sure that Southborough gets a fair deal while being neighborly and while not, hurting Southborough residents or my neighborhood for one, to kind of help out Hopkinton. So there's a fine line and a scale that needs to be done. And I think the initial recommendation is probably weighed heavier towards Hopkinton, Tim. So I think we need to push a little bit on the Southborough side.
But wasn't the consultant that was used formerly our consultant?
So the consultant, so Pear did the assessment for Hopkinton, just like they did it for Ashland when Ashland connected, just because they know our system and how Hopkinton.
I guess what I'm concerned about is that this proposal that they've come out with is so one-sided, and it's completely 180 degrees from what they recommended to us only a handful of years ago.
Correct.
And so I feel like the whole thing should be thrown off the table and they should come back from scratch.
Correct. And that was one of my comments to Karen and the engineer, is that they need to walk back. So Howard, I'm not sure if you're familiar, but they did in 2017, like 130-page water system proposal, but the Public Works Planning Board said the end all be all is a new water tower on Fairview Hill. And that was what we needed. Yes or yes. It was going to save our system, et cetera. And then come 5 years later that,
or it was on the Park Central property. I actually sat through a couple of those meetings, so I remember it, but it was another water tower.
Correct.
So yeah, I'm familiar with it. So
and then all of a sudden Hopkinton comes in and we have this epiphany that we didn't need that tower. We actually don't need one of our other towers. All we need is a bigger tower on Oak Hill and we are going to be golden. So somebody's going to have to explain to me, one, why they didn't think of this in 2017, or two, why are we at this today? Well, what, it doesn't give me a whole lot of confidence in either our 2017 report or today's report, that it wasn't thought of. It's, not in the water master plan. It's not in the capital plan, replacing
also,
Oak Hill Tower and going to one zone hasn't been on our radar for ever.
And if you looked at the report in its best case scenario, I think it was a 10% increase in its best case scenario. It didn't say anything about what the worst case scenario was.
Correct. Yeah.
Right? So if they're using more water than estimated, our numbers
go down
again.
Yeah.
The only thing that was appealing was the ability to take one of our towers offline for maintenance that we can't do now. But that's a large price tag just for that ability. So.
Yep. And one of the things, I'm pushing for is, as somebody that lives right next to it, is my water pressure is terrible. And
we're at the other one. So Tim and I actually live by the other water tower. So our water pressure is not great either. So, and
it's one of those, so our property values are going to be impacted by having this giant tower that we can now see in our backyard. And it's still not going to give me good water pressure. So what can they do for, our area, your area, et cetera, in town to improve our water pressure so that we're not going to be negatively impacted by what Hopkinton has.
Even if it's not my house directly, what does it do for the whole town? And I didn't see, if they were paying for the whole thing, I'm more interested in that, where you need the water, you pay for the whole thing and we get some benefit out of it. But
Correct.
when you come back and say, yeah, we're going to pay for most of it, but that $2.5 million doesn't, we're not getting much for $2.5 million. And I think that can be spent better elsewhere.
Right.
I don't think anyone is going to have the appetite to have their taxes go up so Hopkinton can have water.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to speak for the committee, but I would say the current deal, the first proposal, doesn't work.
The argument wasn't very compelling at all. Like I did, like you, I think you mentioned Andrew or Tim. I didn't hear anything that would benefit Southborough. In fact, what I'm concerned about too is we pay for this. Then what happens when we don't have adequate water supply because it's being drained to Hopkinton? Like I didn't hear any projections about how it might impact Southborough in the future.
Yep.
So that to me is also, would be something that would hopefully be answered. If we're going to pay for anything, how could it impact us later? I didn't hear that, but.
So my understanding is this, the whatever the initials, we have basically an unlimited amount of water coming from them is how they explained it. It's just, but you're right.
That might change.
That might change. And we don't know what the capacity of the pipes are either.
Right.
Right. That's the
Anyway.
question. So,
Yeah, I think we could pull another, 5 or 6 million gallons per day or something like that out of the current pipes we have. And Hopkinton's asking for like 2 or 3. So we still have some buffer, but again, they're expanding rapidly and who knows what they look like in 30 years.
That's another interesting point, Andrew, is that Michael had some interesting comments about Hopkinton's expansion plans and what they've done and how they've created this situation for themselves.
Yep.
And how, I don't want to put words in Michael's mouth, but this is not our problem to fix.
I don't have a problem, helping them fix it. I mean, we have to tap into the line just like we did Ashland, but it needs to make sense for us as well. It can't be, one sided.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem tapping in and giving them the tap, but there has to be, a limitation of how much they can pull a day. And so it doesn't affect us and it has to make sense financially as well.
Yeah, I think
I don't
Aaron's
think
right. We need to look at it more and things like, so they're gonna have to replace some of the mains, right? Are they gonna do what they did in Parkerville and just kind of cut a strip and leave the pavement, or are they gonna repave the whole road? Or are they gonna maybe add sidewalks to that road when they repave it, right? Or is the rate we charge them going to be higher than what we're paying so that we can put some of that money aside so that in 30 years when we have to replace that pump, we have some capital savings that we can use to,
Right.
offset that. So I think there's some of those pieces that haven't been worked out yet. I don't think this current proposal is a good enough deal for Southborough to take a look at, and they need to do some work on it.
My understanding is I don't think we can do it with Hopkinton. I think we missed the boat with Ashland. We could have pushed to tie into their sewer system for Route 9, because that's what's, in my opinion, holding back any development of Route 9. Who wants to do a grocery store or a restaurant on Route 9 on a septic system? I don't think we have that opportunity here, just by proximity of where it would be. But those are the kind of infrastructure upgrades that we should be looking at as a trade-off. That gives us some real, benefit down the road that we're not getting now. So I haven't seen, again, there's got to be something, this deal needs to be sweeter, I think. So.
Yeah. Eric, anything?
No, I mean, I think, right, like there's more to come, right? We all agree it's not there yet, right? We could absorb the future maintenance costs through increasing their water rates, but that has to be contractually obligated. I mean, there's devil's in the details, right? So, I mean, I'm curious. I think the big question is the DPW advisory board actually going to meet to deal with this? Is capital going to step in and do the work, which is probably the best case scenario? But who's going to grab this? It seems like Hopkinton wants to move as fast as municipal projects ever move, given the challenges they're having. So, be curious to see what next conversations look like. I do think it's important for us to stay close on it, no doubt.
It does look like the Public Works Planning Board is going to meet soon. Debbie DeMoria from the Planning Board is one of the new representatives. So some new blood on there. So hoping that they meet soon and kind of start to tackle this one. I mean, they were big, Howard, I'm sure you remember that they had the hearings in 2017 on the other water towers. So, they're certainly familiar with the system. And so they're certainly, I think, the best committee to do the work. We just need them to meet and do the work. All right.
I'll actually have to liaison that or watch the meeting.
All right. Any other questions on that before I move on to the next? All right. So stabilization funds. So this is kind of something I've been thinking about since it's can you make me co-host there, Eric, so I can share?
Yeah, I thought
You are.
You are, man.
Oh, there I am. Okay, now I am. All right. Can you see my screen?
Yes, sir.
All right, so I'm not sure if you are all familiar. Most of you probably are on, what a stabilization fund is. But basically, it's a specific fund or a rainy day fund that we can appropriate a certain amount of money into, and then we, basically require, 2/3 of the community vote for moving money out of the fund. Anybody want me to go into that in detail, or have any questions on what a stabilization fund is? No, okay, I figured as much. So this is just kind of my general ideas on stabilization, just to kind of get the juices flowing. So right now we have a general stabilization fund. It's got $642,000 into it. Advisory committee in the past, is very likes having a small reserve fund. They lowered it from a few million. It was in multiple years. What I'm suggesting is we don't really have a target today. So it hasn't really changed in years. I think having a kind of something that says maybe 1% of revenue, so that when our revenue increases, we start to put a little bit more money into the account just to kind of follow with that. So right now at our current budgeted revenue, it would be 636,000. We're at 642. So we're good there, right? So basically, say we went to a budgeted revenue of 70 million, right? We would want $700,000 in there. So we would look to move some funds into that account. But I'll pause there for any. I mean, most towns have, at least a 2% minimum or a 5% target. So we are lower than most towns, which we all knew. I just think having some kind of target, even though we're low, makes some sense.
Are there additional slides, Andrew, or is this the time where we ask questions?
No, we'll go one by one. So we'll just do the general one first. So anybody have any questions on that kind of idea? Would you be supportive of changing our stabilization policy to target 1% of revenues?
What would that be today?
Today would be 636,000. And we have 642. So it's basically, Tim, like in 2 or 3 years, if we put nothing into that account, right, we would, basically through inflation or through whatever, we would, keep our percentage of our stabilization to our revenue would keep going down because our revenue keeps increasing. So this basically just gives you a target to say, hey, when we kind of go over $64.2 million in revenue, we should put some more money into that account.
And what is this? Are there specific things this fund can be used for, or is it just an emergency fund that just?
This one's really more of an emergency fund, right? It hasn't been used in years, but it's just kind of an emergency fund. It's and it's a small emergency fund compared to other towns, but it's just basically advisory in the past has said, we don't need a $5 million emergency fund. If the town needs it, the taxpayers will, can provide it. But this is a small one that gives us some some cushion and per our auditors and per our creditors and credit agencies, they do want to see some stabilization. So this shouldn't be zero. I wouldn't go lower than 1%. I think that's, pretty low and conservative.
So Andrew, if we were in a situation, whether it's today or 10 years from now, kind of if revenue increases faster than the stabilization fund grows, what is the mechanism in the emergency scenario to cover the delta between the costs and whatever's in the stabilization fund? Is it an emergency town meeting to raise taxes for that purpose, or how does that actually get
It
handled?
would just be basically when we went to the next budget season, we would, try to transfer in some money to top off that account, right? So next year, the budgeted revenue is 63.6 million, right? So if in, say next year, it's 70 million, just for round numbers, we would look to in our, annual town meeting, add $48,000 or $58,000 to our stabilization fund. Transfer, whatever it would be. Just
I think the question is if an event happened and we had to use the stabilization fund, and some catastrophic event happened and we wiped out the stabilization fund.
correct.
And it wasn't there, what is the mechanism to pay the rest of the bills? Did I get that right, Adam?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, basically, if say for whatever reason we had a $10 million bogey come out of nowhere and we had to pay it, right? We would have to have a special town meeting and we would have to increase the levy, but we could take $642,000 off of that with the stabilization funds.
Okay. And what's the history of our utilization of the stabilization fund, the way it's currently funded?
I don't know of the last time we used it. I mean, Tim, I don't, it's been at least 10 years. Right? Can you think of anything?
No. No, I can't.
So it's basically an in case of emergency account that sits there. It's just one of those, eventually, if it doesn't move, right, it's going to be smaller and smaller in comparison to our budget.
Yeah, we're just, I guess, I don't want to speak for Adam. I think we're trying to understand why and when it would be used, just so we understand how much to put in it. So,
I mean, town gets hacked. They demand 500,000 in Bitcoin. We could use this.
right.
Or we could have a town meeting and increase the levy, right? I mean, or we could ideally just contact our insurance company, but you never know, right? It's
Yeah. Again,
I guess, sorry, Howard, keep going. I didn't.
no, that was it. I think I understand it. I'm curious why, we're at 1% and most towns you're saying have a minimum of 2. We're about half that. And frankly, I think I'm okay with that if we haven't used it. We're a small town with not many, with not many things to spend. So I don't.
Yeah, I don't know if you had a chance to read the cash reserve policy white paper.
I did.
But that's basically, spells out like what you would use it for, why we don't really need a big one.
Mhm.
The town could always do that, but advisory still recommended having something, just not as big as we had before.
You're talking about the one that John wrote, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So just bear in mind, it's a very well written paper. I don't agree with all of it.
Yeah.
And it's a biased paper. So
Yeah.
please understand that it's written. It's an argumentative. It's not an unbiased report. It's an argumentative paper that was written to convince town meeting to lower the reserve fund.
Correct.
So it's definitely like one side of the story. It's not a neutral educational pamphlet.
Well,
And
Tim,
again, that's why I'm wondering, if we're at 1, that's why I'm trying to wonder why we're at 1% over 2. It sounds like the history was John went to town meeting just to push that opinion and it won. So
Correct.
Yes.
And in this, I'm assuming basically that's still the will of town meeting, right? Is that we keep it that low. I mean, we could do a whole nother assessment of what should we really have compared to other towns and, try to do, increase the levy or do an override to fund it. But I was just kind of keeping it steady state, but just noticing that we don't really increase it and our revenue keeps increasing and eventually it'll become too small.
Yeah, I guess I'm also trying, and I do think it's worthwhile maybe to benchmark against similar types of towns in the area. But I am also wondering, in what way has it impacted us in any meaningful manner, the fact that we're at 1% versus 2%, whether it's borrowing money or an event that's come up where we wish that we had more, which doesn't seem like it's happened in at least 10 years. Like, has there ever been a situation that we can think of where having 2% would have been materially beneficial to us, is what I'm looking to understand. And without an example, it feels like we're doing this somewhat arbitrarily.
So,
Sorry, can I just Tim, I don't mean to cut you off, but I think this is one piece of the conversation that I just want to add on to Adam. So I think especially for myself and maybe Adam, maybe Marcy as well, but like his new members. So we've read and discussed what we've now saying sort of a little bit biased, certainly with an agenda paper, but I don't feel like we've ever actually reviewed the pros other than like, great, you have money to use for these scenarios. Like that's a very obvious, you have money to spend if an emergency comes up. But again, understand that paper was biased. Like my quick perspective is like the pros on the side of keeping it low seem to very much outweigh the oh crap clause. And I'm being a little crude and quick here, but so I think I'd like to hear sort of what is that counter argument to increasing it to 2 or setting a target for 5%, right? To help us better understand that.
yeah, so one thing I'll say before I let Andrew go, is, bear in mind, one of the things that John or Al would say is, if something happens 10 years from now, it's their problem. It's that town meeting's problem. It's not our problem. They can use their money. There are a couple problems with that. One of which is bad things often happen at bad times, right? You generally want to save your money when times are good, so that when times are bad, there's a lump sum there that you otherwise couldn't get, right? That's one argument. You don't, like in the middle of a pandemic, you don't want to go to town meeting and say, hey, by the way, I know I know the economy's down and everybody's sick, but let's add $5 million to the levy this year. Right. So that's one reason. The other reason is to bear in mind that the town's ability to tax is very limited. There, if there is a problem and we would have to go to town meeting to get a considerable amount of tax revenue, you bear in mind that there are strict laws on how much you can raise the tax rate, Prop 2.5, and you could put the town. I mean, I don't have a specific example for you. You could put the town in a situation where we need to raise money and we can't, at least not in the short term, because we have to hold 1 or 2 votes, townwide.
Yeah, and I mean, Eric, the benefit is when you look at it from an auditor perspective or from an external credit rating agency is the same as you would with, somebody looking at you from a mortgage, right? How much money do you have in the bank to cover this if something goes wrong, right? Your debt payments, your debt service, et cetera. They obviously want you to have more. We have had the same amount for a while, and we are still a AAA rated entity. The amount of stabilization funds you have does go into your score, but it's a low score. And we have enough. We are pretty close to the edge where if we went below about 3% of our total revenue in stabilization, and they include free cash in that, that we would get dinged probably, to a double A, or maybe, down another notch. For our rating. So, certainly advantageous to keep it above 3. We are close to that. So I think we are okay, at this number. I just think, we don't want to go lower. And right now we haven't put any money into this in a long time. So this kind of just says, let's keep it at that 1%. Let's not let it, dwindle down lower in the future.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, I think, just giving my quick 2 cents on where my head's at currently is that I'm with you I don't want to negatively impact our credit rating and our ability to borrow. So I think maintaining that, 3% level with the reserve fund Free cash. But I think, increasing it significantly is not something currently I see the value in. So I'm open to all discussions of it, but I hear a lot of things, right? We've got a lot of capital projects that are going to hit us hard. And maybe you could make the argument that we could save up for that now. We've got, community preservation, right? And we're talking about, there's a lot on the docket that like our bills just keep going up and up and up. And so I understand that stabilization to some extent maybe can help blunt that, but I'd rather see a combined effort versus us trying to blunt that through a number of different means. So again, I'm status quo and not negatively impacting us, but I haven't yet seen the argument to say we need to increase it, significantly.
Yeah.
Just my quick take.
And Eric, some towns do have a capital stabilization fund, right? And they put money into it every year, and then they pay for capital items. The other side of the coin is people would say, so I'm putting money into an account to buy something in the future, but if I move, I don't ever get to use that. So instead, what you do is you purchase it and you bond it out in the future, and then people are paying it as they're using it. Right. So that's kind of the flip side to that coin, which I actually think that bonding it and kind of lining up the cost with the use is a better way to do it. But that's just me.
I agree with you.
All right. Any more questions on this this idea? So would we be in support of recommending this to Brian to kind of come up with a formal policy to try to keep it at 1%?
I'd still like to bring Al.
Okay.
And Mr. Butler.
Okay. Yeah, this was more, Tim, just to kind of get the juices flowing. So I haven't talked to John or Al yet. So certainly we'll table this.
You're not proposing anything.
Correct.
Outrageous.
Correct.
Yeah, Andrew, I don't know if I'm there yet, but I also agree with Tim. It's not a huge leap today, but if we track maybe how we're expecting to grow over the next 10 plus years, I might get uncomfortable with how much money we're putting in there if we're never not really utilizing it. But today I'm probably leaning no.
Yeah. And I think the important thing is, like, we don't usually go up in our revenue that much. Maybe we'll go up $500,000 or $1 million, so maybe we put $500 in it or $1,000 a year. We don't usually jump our revenue, significant amounts. It's just basically to get into our thought process that this is what we want. It's not a requirement. You don't have to. It's just to say that we have a policy that we want to stick it at 1%. And if we, next year, instead of 636,000, the target would be 643. We put, $300 into it and make ourselves feel good. But okay. Okay to go to the next one.
Yeah.
All right. So the next one is basically an idea to create a stabilization fund specifically for free cash. And so this is one in which the money would move in and out pretty frequently. The general idea is we don't really control what free cash is. We set the budget, but what amount comes in for excise or different taxes, et cetera, can fluctuate year to year. And what this would do is we'd kind of come up with what amount we would like to see in free cash. Anything that's over that amount, we would shift into the fund. And then the following year, if we were low, we would basically equalize it out. So for instance, in FY21, our free cash was 1.87 million. And then FY22 was 1.4. So we started FY22, $470,000 year over year in the black that we had to make up with budget cuts or et cetera. So, I would have preferred to see like 1.6 and 1.6, kind of just smooth out the free cash. So, move $200,000 from FY21's free cash into the account and then release it the following year to kind of level them out. So, probably putting a cap on it. I don't know what, I was through 400 to 500K out there. And the target I came up with is about 4%. We're currently at 3.65. But the 4% would give us a little buffer to not go below that 3% stabilization level. Which would mean this year we would have needed another 220K in our free cash, which I think we're close to that, Tim, with the warrant articles that we did at fall town meeting, I think we took 150K out of it. So we would have been pretty close to that number anyway. But just kind of smooths out the free cash so that we start the next budget cycle with, not in a hole or not too much of a surplus.
Are there any limitations on this type of fund in terms of using it? Like, I understand you have a cap on it, but
Yeah, you can use a stabilization fund for basically anything, but when you set it up, you put limitations on it when you write what it's for.
okay, but that's all.
Correct. Like you would say like, okay, the stabilization fund can be used to put money into free cash. And if we're over the cap, we can move that money into the general fund or to any other purpose or you can label it out however you want. But it does give you pretty good flexibility. It does require, I think, right, Tim, a two-thirds vote for releasing stabilization funds.
That sounds right.
I think it's majority to fund it and then 2/3 to release it. So this basically just, smooths out our free cash so that we're not starting year over year in a hole or in a surplus.
And sorry, because my computer is giving me a hard time, so I cut out a little bit. So forgive me if you address this.
Can't hear you.
You froze for a second there, Eric.
Sorry, can you guys hear me now?
Yep.
Cool. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Tucking my AirPod case. What does it take to establish a free cash stabilization? Just warrant articles just have to.
It's a warrant article. You would create it. I think it's probably 2/3 majority to create it, but it's a small little blurb you'd put in the warrant article.
Does it have to be immediately funded?
No, you can fund it with nothing. Usually you do fund it. Right. So this one we could not fund it and only fund it when there was a surplus over whatever that target would be. Right.
Okay.
So this year we wouldn't have funded it because we were below that 4% target. Right. So we would just be nothing. But say next year our free cash, instead of whatever it was this year, 1.68 was 2.5 million. Right. We would be over that 3% or 4% target. We would move some of that money into this account to help out for the following year when maybe we were at, 1.6 again.
Right. Got it.
Andrew, this was always one of Kathy's points of interest, right?
Sorry, what was that, Tim? Broke up for 1 second.
Sorry, free cash was always one of Kathy's points of interest.
Correct.
She would often speak of it. I would be curious to know if she's trying to make changes in the free cash process.
I think this still, I did talk to her. This makes sense to her. Obviously we need it. I didn't circulate it to the rest of the select board. I think it's how the free cash gets budgeted is up to our finance team. So they're usually conservative. This basically helps us if they're overly conservative to, flatten out the years where they maybe were wrong or right.
So isn't it the case, Andrew, that if the town underestimates their receipts for the upcoming fiscal year,
Correct.
then the overflow goes into free cash?
Correct.
So yeah. And I think that this was something that Kathy would speak to, is that our free cash, when we lost our large stabilization fund, our free cash suddenly went up, right?
And I think the accounting team was more conservative in their local receipts budget.
Right, which raised our free cash.
Okay. Raised their free cash, right?
Yeah. So this is something I would want to talk through with some other people like John and Al.
Yep.
Just to have, because I'm not an accounting guy, just to get a better understanding of how this stabilization fund would play out, right? In terms of how our receipts are being estimated and such.
Yeah, it'd basically be like when you went to the next annual town meeting, already what your free cash is because it was certified the prior year. I mean, then we obviously know what it was for that year previously. So you know what you were starting at for a budget perspective. So you would know what your gap is coming into annual town meeting. So the idea would be if there's money in this account, we could procure it to kind of level that out.
I guess what I'm saying, Andrew, is would we see a better estimate of our upcoming receipts having the stabilization fund as a safety net?
I mean, like try to be more accurate because we know we could add to it, maybe.
Yeah,
But I
because
think I don't think the fluctuations are so much due to how they're doing the estimation. I think it's just how the nature of it comes out. The
1.4 is COVID. I get that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So it's one of those like, there's more external factors, people not buying cars, people buying new cars, which has lower excise than used cars. Yeah. So, just weird things like that. I think the chip shortage, certainly helps because people aren't buying new ones. So there's weird external factors to most of it. All right. So yeah, I think all these we should, we certainly need to circulate them more with the finance team and with Al and John and some of the other people in town. But sounds like it's a possibility. You guys, that just need some more work on it.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
Any other questions on that one?
If anybody has questions about the background on this, feel free to reach out.
Thanks. I probably will. I don't have a good understanding of it yet, but I appreciate the concept. So if those guys come and speak to us, that would be really helpful. Thanks.
Yep. And then the last one is, this is something they did in Plymouth, a pavement management plan, debt stabilization. So basically what this would be is our road maintenance money, but located within a stabilization fund. So I think and I see two main benefits of that. One, we already have the funds in account. It's just not being considered stabilization because it's in a capital article. And two, it kind of gives town meeting a little bit more kind of authority to release the funds for the pavement management plan. So there's some talk between capital and select board and DPW to put together a formal pavement management plan and rate our roads and understand what roads need to be done in what sequence. And basically that plan for the year would get submitted to capital. Capital would review it. These are the roads that need to be done. These are the costs. This is what bid I'm going to go out with, blah, blah, blah. And then that could be brought to town meeting to kind of, release those funds from the stabilization account. And then, we could, put together some kind of a process where capital and select board would probably have to review the actual bids as they come through and make sure they kind of corresponded with the plan. But it's very similar to the process that we have today that we added recently in terms of capital kind of having oversight. But basically it just classifies it as a stabilization fund versus multiple years worth of capital articles.
That slowed down the process of getting the roads done because now we have to wait to release the funds.
Yes and no. I mean, right now we save up the money for every 3 to 4 years to do a large project. Mm-hmm. It would slow it down in terms of right now. I believe, Tim, it just takes the select board to vote to release the funds out of the account. This would basically allow town meeting to kind of the ability to vote on the plan as well as the funds being released. So we would basically have a report done, by capital or DPW or Public Works Planning Board that said, this year we're planning on doing no roads, right? We're just going to keep our money. Or this year we're planning on doing a large $1.5 million paving project that's going to include these roads, these sidewalks, et cetera, et cetera. That'll get vetted by capital. Come to town meeting, we say, yep, okay, we're good with that. Release the funds, and then it goes through the normal process. But most of these plans and these paving projects are done we years of notice.
I just see the fight at town meeting of why not my road first, and and the argument and trying to get what funds for what roads.
Yeah, I'm with you. Can you clarify that, Andrew? So town meeting would have to approve that larger release or those larger projects?
Well, it's the
Capital
same as
plan
it is
has to-
today, right? Town meeting still has to fund the capital article. Just right
Yep.
now, we have nothing that says that this is what we're doing. We could do the same. We could just say we're going to release a blank amount of money for DPW to do with what they want. I think there has been some pushback in town recently that the town doesn't have enough oversight into where their
Right.
money is going. So this would, kind of allow the town to have a little bit more say, which we could today, right? We could reject, the
It shouldn't
foreign,
be-
the
not to
the
jump
road
in,
maintenance article, right? And say, don't come with a road maintenance article until you tell us what roads are going to be done. But this kind of pulls it all up and puts it into an account, which also helps us with our stabilization levels. But then, basically you put together a process of how you release it, what information you want to have, where it gets vetted, which the select board's already started to do, where any road project needs to get vetted through them. Now it just kind of formalizes it in terms of a stabilization fund.
Not opposed to it, but as far as the additional oversight, it just seems perhaps unnecessary. Shouldn't DPW be doing that report and that plan ahead of time and getting the capital? Shouldn't the capital plan be doing that already? It seems like
That
they
doesn't
should be-
happen, Howard. If you
So we're
ask,
just trying to fix another mistake in town by doing it this way.
yeah, if you asked for a report on the net, the data doesn't exist, the plan doesn't exist. This will, for example, had this existed, it would have prevented the St. Mark's fiasco.
Or possibly fix the culvert on whatever that road that's closed is, or the other countless.
Yes.
Yeah. So it sounds like we don't have the planning on the DPW level that we should have to have a multi-year plan of what roads are being done. And this is trying to push that.
And there's a separate stream, Howard, where, the select board is pushing with capital and, and with us yet too, we haven't really seen anything yet to bring in a, company to do a pavement management plan, to do a road assessment, like Northborough has. Like, they know our roads are an 83, right, rated.
Right.
If we spend 500,000 next year, we can make them an 84. If we spend 300,000, they're going to go to an 81. Right. We'll be able to improve these roads, and this road is better done at the same time as this road. And, and they have a whole plan like that, and they stagger them. And so basically we want to have that plan. We want to know where the money's going, that it's going in the right places for the right purpose in the most efficient way possible. And then to just pool the money into one account and release it when those big projects come through. But the main benefit is to have additional stabilization there for the 2, 3, 4 years that we're not using these funds.
Yeah. Sorry, somebody else can go.
Yeah, I was working on a thought there. I guess what I'm trying to think of how this will play out. So if we have this fund, are there things that we would spend on because we have the fund, which may be a good thing, but may also be something that we would have normally deprioritized for good reason because it was competing with other projects since they were all in the same, for lack of a better term, fund or pool of dollars, that now that it's being parsed into this separate fund, it's sort of not competing. These projects won't be competing with other projects for that same pool. And ultimately we end up overspending on things we might not normally spend on just because we have those dollars available. I'm wondering, I hope we're more disciplined than that, but I wonder how others think that might play out. And if it ends up, we end up spending on things that maybe normally we wouldn't have wanted to in the first place.
So the pool exists today, right? So we have, I think, about $1.5 million in money pooled up for road maintenance, right? It can only be used for road maintenance and paving projects. So it's basically takes those, 6, 7, 8 years worth of warrant articles, whatever we have left over, combines it together into one pool, renames it road maintenance, from years, whatever, to stabilization funds, right? So you're basically taking that 1.5 million, which then is now stabilization. It helps with your rating and your auditor's rating because it's a stabilization account. And it's, kind of combined together. So it helps with the agency rating. And then, it's just like with town meeting, you would release how much funds we needed for that particular year based upon what plan. Whereas today we kind of just approve a lump sum without a plan behind it.
So is this just about optics?
It's a little bit about getting credit for something we're already doing.
Okay, fair enough.
And providing probably a little bit more transparency in terms of what's being done with those funds than has been done in the past. Now, this working with capital to look at the plan before funds are spent is already part of the new policy that select board put in place. So they're not going to approve a road project unless capital has vetted it. And town meeting's still approving the funding. So it's a very similar process. It's just mostly kind of getting credit for it being stabilization versus road maintenance.
This doesn't include chapter 90.
Correct. I don't think you can put chapter 90 in it, Tim.
So that's a yearly amount of money that would still be available.
Correct.
Direct to the DPW and the select board to do what they have to do on a yearly basis.
And chapter 90 was just increased for FY23. So it's a pretty good amount next year. All right.
Andrew, keep going. Since I'm going to pop off video for a second. Go on mute.
Sure. Yeah, so I think that's the basic gist of that. I mean, nothing here is really earth shattering, right? We're not really creating any brand new stabilization that's going to pull that much money out of the town, with the exception of maybe the free cash one, right? But that's relatively small, and it's mostly just to kind of put it back in the next year or the year after when something happens, right? So it's not supposed to just sit there. So this is kind of a light stabilization versus other towns will have like a maintenance stabilization account, a capital stabilization account, and they fund them pretty significantly. All right. Any more questions on these?
Nope.
All right. So again, we're not taking any votes. This is just more some stabilization ideas that I've had that I wanted to circulate and, kind of get the juices flowing and start to think about. And, obviously there's more to come on any of these, and, whether or not they make it to a fall town meeting or a spring, annual town meeting or wherever is to be seen. So Tim, you think a separate meeting with Al and John and probably some other folks would make sense?
I do.
Okay.
Because they're the ones who are going to argue the con at town meeting.
Yep. Okay. Any other business properly brought forth? Does anybody have any other business? Okay.
Do not.
Public comment?
Can
Do
I
you have
ask,
any questions on the Public Works road stabilization fund? No. All right.
hey, Andrew, has there been any update on the land swap discussion or on the burial investigation?
I have not heard anything. I'm not sure the permits have come through. Marcy, I don't know if you or Kevin are closer to that. I don't think the permits have come through yet.
I don't think there's any update yet, but the St. Mark's Working Group meets this week. I think tomorrow, actually. So I don't know if there'll be any updates on that call or not, but none that I'm aware of.
And I believe Kathy is now the new school liaison, whatever we want to call it, that Marty was. So I think she's planning on talking to St. Mark's shortly about the land swap.
Do you know if the CPC is still going to move forward with wanting to increase the surcharge?
I don't know. I think the CPC was supposed to meet and they ended up canceling their meeting. I think they had some technical difficulties. So I don't think they met to discuss it yet. So I think, to be determined, and, I don't know whether or not that would make it to the fall town meeting. I think ideally it would. So Howard, if you caught one of our previous meetings, the last time there are summer meetings, we kind of have like one topic that we look at. This one was stabilization. The last one we talked about possibly increasing the CPA surcharge from 1% to 3% so that we get the additional match. So we're kind of running those numbers. The main reason talking about the CPA increase now is because there's a large athletic complex project for Algonquin that's on the slate for the next year or two,
I saw that
of
presentation.
which we could use a significant amount of the cost for CPA. We couldn't use it for the actual purchase of turf or the shock pad, but you can do it for the drainage and all this, all the other track and that kind of thing. So good, I think 75% of it could be CPA eligible in theory. We still have to run this through CPC and through the committees and all that kind of thing. But we thought it was worth a conversation with the match has been going up from the state. It was 44% this year. Plus when you get to 3%, you get the additional match. So we'd end up about 55% match, I think it was, on our money. And personally, I'd rather put in $1 and get $1.55 back when we're going to be either that or it's going to the general fund. So
Sure.
we kind of had a conversation about that. I think the committee was generally in favor of that concept, at least moving forward in concept. In order to make it for next year, we would have to have a vote at town meeting, or I think 5% of the town's registered voter signatures, which is going to be hard. So town meeting, to then put it on a ballot to then have it voted in. It has to be voted in on a ballot. So the thought was to maybe bring it to fall town meeting, have CPC bring it as a supporting article to increase it to 3%. If it passes town meeting, put it on maybe the May election or whatever the next election cycle is on the ballot to try to get it increased. It did fail the first time around 51-49. So it was a pretty close vote to get to 3%. So we might be able to do it, but I think it makes sense to get a little more bang for our buck.
Okay, thanks.
Last question.
Sure.
Do we have a hard stop for when we absolutely must vote on the reserve fund transfers?
We must vote it before July 15th. That's why we're doing it on the 13th.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So that we have to do it like once the full closeout, we do the interdepartmental transfer approvals and reserve fund closeouts. Which unfortunately aren't usually ready until that second week of July. All right. Public comment. I think we are good. Motion. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Motion to adjourn. Second.
Second.
All right. Roll call vote. Tim,
Aye.
Eric,
All right.
Adam,
Aye.
Marcy,
Aye.
Howard,
Aye.
Andrew is aye. Thanks, everybody.